It was a hot and sunny morning in a small village on the outskirts of the dense rainforest. The sound of birds echoed through the tall, lush trees, and the sweet scent of wildflowers blended with the freshness of the damp vegetation. In the main clearing of the village, children ran and played while their parents worked hard, tending to small crops and repairing houses made of wood and straw. Life was simple here, but full of everyday joys, until something unexpected changed the fate of one family forever. In a modest hut, in the heart of the village, lived Lara, a young mother with a tired appearance but always carrying a loving gaze. Her newborn son, Miguel, only 6 months old, was everything to her. However, Miguel was born with a heart condition that the local doctors could not treat. Each cry from him felt like a knife cutting through Lara's heart, as she didn't know how to relieve her baby's suffering. The baby needed specialized and expensive care, something Lara and her family could never afford. Desperation grew with each passing day, and Lara, with no other options, would spend hours lying beside her son, softly humming to try and soothe him. But every time Miguel cried, his tiny face would wrinkle with pain, and the sound seemed to echo throughout the village, bringing an uneasy silence that even affected the surrounding animals. High in the trees, a group of monkeys watched the village with curiosity. Among them was an older monkey named Kiko, known for his intelligence and unusual behavior. He always observed human activities with a level of interest beyond what was typical for an animal, as if he could understand more than any other member of his troop. Kiko had a deep scar on one of his paws, a remnant of a hunter's trap that nearly cost him his life years ago. Since then, he had become even more attuned to the sounds and behaviors around him, noticing things that other animals overlooked. And it was Kiko who, one afternoon, heard Miguel's sharp, insistent cries coming from Lara's hut. The sound traveled through the forest like a distress call, and something inside Kiko stirred. He tilted his head and looked in the direction of the sound with an almost human expression of concern. Without knowing why, he felt an inexplicable pull toward that place. That night, while everyone slept, he silently climbed down from the trees and approached the hut. Little Miguel was crying again, and his mother, exhausted, rocked him in her arms, tears of helplessness streaming down her face. Seeing the scene through the window, Kiko remained still, his gaze fixed on the baby. Something in the pain of that cry touched the monkey's heart deeply. As an animal who had known suffering, the pain of losing members of his troop and nearly losing his own life, Kiko felt an empathy that no other creature in the forest had felt for that baby. He knew he needed to do something, even if he didn't know exactly what. In the days that followed, Kiko continued to observe. With each new cry, he would get a little closer until, one morning, he mustered the courage and sat quietly at the entrance of the hut. Lara was so focused on trying to soothe Miguel that she didn't notice the unexpected visitor. Kiko then did something that no one could have expected. He began to make soft, repetitive sounds, a kind of gentle murmur that resembled a calming, comforting tune. It was a sound he used to soothe the young ones in his troop when they were frightened. Lara, surprised, looked outside and saw Kiko sitting calmly. For a moment, she thought of shooing him away, but something in the monkey's posture stopped her. Instead of feeling fear or strangeness, she felt an inexplicable peace. Miguel, who had been writhing in her arms, suddenly stopped crying and fixed his gaze on Kiko. The baby's large, innocent eyes seemed to shine with curiosity. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. The continuous murmur of Kiko filled the hut like a soft breeze of hope. For the first time in days, Miguel fell asleep in Lara's arms without sobbing in pain. Lara looked at the monkey with a mixture of astonishment and gratitude. Who was this strange visitor who seemed to have the power to calm her baby in a way that even she couldn't? And why was he there? Seeing that Miguel had finally fallen asleep, Kiko slowly stood up and, with one last look at Lara, disappeared silently into the direction of the trees. But one thing was clear to Lara: this monkey was not like the others. There was a connection, an understanding that transcended the usual communication between animals and humans. She knew he would return. In the following days, Kiko continued to appear. and every time Miguel's cries began to echo through the village, Kiko would come, sit at the hut's door, and start his gentle song. The baby, even in moments of intense pain, seemed to respond to the sound as if it were a magical melody. Gradually, Lara began to accept the monkey's presence as part of the routine. There was something mysterious and comforting in that ritual. It was as if Kiko understood the depth of the pain she felt and wanted to alleviate her burden. Yet, the problem persisted. Miguel still needed treatment, and Kiko couldn't change that reality. Or could he? In Lara's heart, hope was rekindled with each encounter with Kiko. Perhaps, in some way, this special monkey had a greater role to play in Miguel's story. And she was about to discover that the bonds of empathy and compassion can extend far beyond the boundaries of species. Time passed, and while Miguel seemed to find a little relief in Kiko's soothing sounds, his health continued to deteriorate with each passing week. The villagers began to notice the constant presence of the monkey around Lara's hut. Some looked at him with suspicion, thinking it was a bad omen to have an animal so close to a sick baby. But Lara, clinging to the fragile hope that Kiko brought her, never tried to chase him away. On the contrary, she felt that he was an angel sent for a reason she could not fully understand. One afternoon, while Lara was washing clothes in the nearby river, Miguel suddenly started crying with an intensity she had never heard before. His small body trembled with pain, and his reddened face made it clear that something was terribly wrong. Desperate, Lara rushed back home with Miguel in her arms, her hands shaking as she tried to soothe him, tears streaming down her face. At that moment, an older man respected in the village, known as Mr. Antonio, approached her. He was a stern-looking man, with gray hair and calloused hands, known for his wisdom and for being a community leader. Seeing Lara in complete despair, he held her by the arm and looked into her eyes with firmness, as if trying to transfer his own strength to the young mother. "Lara, I know you've tried everything to help your son, but this can't go on like this. You need to take him to the city. It's the only way to give him a real chance to survive." Lara knew that Mr. Antonio's advice was sensible, but the nearest city was more than 3 days away, through a dense and dangerous forest. Moreover, the cost of treatment was something she could never afford, not even by selling all her belongings. The hope that had flickered dimly in her heart began to fade again. She looked down at Miguel in her arms, his cries softening to a weak and painful whimper, as if he was giving up. And then, there at the edge of the village, Kiko appeared once more. He approached slowly, as if sensing the urgency of the moment, his dark eyes fixed on the baby with an impressive seriousness. It was almost as if the monkey understood the conversation and knew that the baby's life was hanging by a thread. Kiko began his usual soft murmuring, but this time there was a change. The sound was deeper, more rhythmic, as if he was calling someone or something. To everyone's surprise, other monkeys began to emerge from the trees, drawn by the sound Kiko was making. They descended in silence, forming a semicircle around Lara and Miguel, watching with unusual attentiveness. The village froze. No one dared to move. No one knew what to do. It was an almost surreal sight. Dozens of monkeys sitting in absolute silence, their eyes fixed on the sick baby. Lara felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at Kiko and, for the first time, sensed the depth of his determination. The monkey stood up and slowly walked over to Lara, extending his paw as if pointing toward the dense forest, indicating a direction. Mr. Antonio watched the scene in disbelief. "He's trying. He's saying you should follow him," he murmured, his voice full of awe. Lara hesitated. How could she trust an animal? How could she know he wasn't leading her to a dangerous place? But something in Kiko's gaze made her stop and reconsider. It was as if he were begging her to believe, as if he wanted to show her that there was a purpose, a reason for all of this. Finally, with her heart racing and no alternatives left, Lara made the most daring decision of her life. "I will follow you, Kiko," she whispered, hugging Miguel tightly. Just don't let my baby die, please." And so, Lara, with Miguel in her arms, began walking into the dense forest, guided by Kiko and followed by a procession of monkeys who surrounded her closely. Mr. Antonio, unsure of what else to do, asked the other villagers not to interfere. It was a scene they had never witnessed before, and deep down, he too felt that this was more than just a desperate decision. The journey was arduous. Lara stumbled over thick roots and felt branches scratching her skin, but she didn't stop. Every time she paused, Kiko would turn around to look at her, his eyes shining as if urging her to keep going. The silence of the forest was broken only by Lara's footsteps and the occasional weak cries of Miguel. The group moved slowly, with the monkeys forming a protective circle around her. They were taking her to a place that Lara had never known, a place so deep in the forest that no human from the village dared to venture there. For 3 days, they traveled like this, stopping only briefly so that Lara could eat some wild fruits and drink from the streams that crossed their path. Each time Miguel cried, Kiko would approach, emitting his comforting sounds that, inexplicably, seemed to give the baby the strength to keep breathing. Finally, at the end of the 3rd day, the group arrived at a hidden clearing deep in the forest, where ancient trees stood like giant guardians. In the center, there was a small wooden cabin, almost concealed by the dense vegetation. The place exuded a sense of serenity and safety. Kiko stopped in front of the cabin and looked at Lara with a firm gaze. Exhausted, Lara could barely stand, but she forced herself to walk up to the door and knock, unsure of what to expect. The door creaked open, and a figure appeared, an elderly man with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. He wore a white coat, and although he was clearly far from any hospital, there was something about his posture that conveyed professionalism and security. He looked at Lara, then at the baby in her arms, and finally at Kiko, who remained seated beside her. "It seems you brought me a very special patient, my old friend," the man said softly, kneeling down to look into the monkey's eyes. Lara couldn't believe what she was hearing. Who was this man? And how did he know Kiko? Her heart raced, a mix of hope and fear battling within her. She tried to speak, but the words got lost in a desperate sob. The man placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and nodded. "Come in. Let's take a look at your little one." It seems Kiko knew exactly where to bring you, and at that moment, Lara knew that her decision to follow the monkey had not been in vain. Kiko had led her to a last hope, something that no other human could have offered. Miguel's weak cries echoed through the clearing one last time, and the determination in Kiko's eyes shone brighter than ever. Inside the small cabin, the elderly man examined Miguel with experienced hands and precise movements, as if he were a specialized doctor. Lara watched in silence, not daring to breathe, afraid that a single sound might unravel the miracle unfolding before her eyes. Kiko, sitting in the corner, attentively observed every gesture of the man, like a vigilant guardian. "He has a severe heart condition," the man said softly after a few minutes. "I've seen this before. It's a congenital issue, and without proper surgery, he doesn't have much time." Lara felt the world spinning around her. She already knew that Miguel's condition was serious, but hearing the word surgery made her heart sink. There were no surgeries in this remote place. How could she give her son the chance he needed? The man seemed to sense her panic. "Don't worry," he said with a warm smile. "I've performed a few surgeries here before, improvised, but successful. I'm not a renowned surgeon, but I've done my best with the resources I've gathered over the years. And Kiko seems to believe that I'm the right person to care for your baby." Lara looked at Kiko, the monkey who had guided her journey, and then back at the doctor. How could this be possible? What did Kiko know that no one else did? It was as if the monkey understood the complexity of the situation and had calculated each step to ensure that Lara and Miguel arrived here. And now, with a faint glimmer of hope flickering once again, Lara felt that everything was in the hands of a destiny she could barely comprehend. I have no money to pay for a surgery," Lara whispered, feeling the harsh reality crashing down on her again. "I have no way to repay you." The doctor shook his head gently. "I'm not asking for money. If Kiko brought you here, it's because he believes your baby deserves a chance. I don't know how to explain it, but whenever he brings someone to me, it's as if he knows there's a greater reason for me to intervene. I accepted a long time ago that some things in life can't be measured in coins." His words echoed in Lara's heart like a melody of hope. She felt tears running down her face, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She could only manage a barely audible thank you, as the man began to prepare for what would be the longest and most decisive night of her life. The man, who introduced himself as Dr. Raoul, pulled a small wooden chest from under a table and began arranging instruments that looked rudimentary but well-maintained. Kiko, for his part, moved silently around the cabin, as if he knew exactly where each item should be. He picked up small vials and handed them to the doctor, who accepted them with a nod, as if this were the most natural routine in the world. It was as if the monkey were a trained assistant, helping to prepare the environment for something monumental. "He has experience in this," Dr. Raoul explained, noticing the astonishment on Lara's face. "Years ago, I found Kiko trapped in a hunter's snare, almost dead. I took him in, treated him, and I think he understood what I did for him. Since then, he always seems to know when someone needs help and brings them to me." Lara felt a lump in her throat. Kiko had known suffering, and somehow he had dedicated his life to saving other creatures who, like him, faced death. She looked at little Miguel, who was still weak but breathing softly in her arms, and then at the monkey, whose eyes shone with an intensity she would never forget. He wasn't just an animal. He was a protector, a savior. The surgery lasted hours. Time seemed to drag on endlessly as Lara waited outside the cabin, hugging herself, silently praying for a miracle. She could hear the muffled sounds of metal against metal, Dr. Raoul's reassuring murmurs, and occasionally the soft sounds of Kiko, who never left the baby's side. The monkey stayed there, watching every movement, emitting low and gentle noises as if wanting to transmit strength to little Miguel. Finally, when the first light of dawn began to break through the forest, the cabin door opened. Dr. Raoul appeared, sweaty and exhausted, but with a smile of relief. Lara ran to him, almost stumbling, her eyes fixed on the doctor's face, searching for any sign of hope. "He's going to be fine," Dr. Raoul said in a hoarse voice. "The surgery was difficult, but Kiko and I did our best. Miguel is a little fighter. He'll need time to recover, but he'll make it." Lara's legs gave way. She fell to her knees on the dirt, sobbing in relief, unable to believe what she was hearing. She looked inside the cabin and saw Miguel, lying on a small makeshift bed, sleeping peacefully. His tiny face, once contorted in pain, now had a serene expression. Lara's tears mixed with the soil, and she began murmuring words of gratitude over and over. But Kiko didn't let her cry alone. He approached slowly and, to Lara's astonishment, placed his furry hand over hers, as if to say, "He made it. Now you can rest too." Lara looked at the monkey with tear-filled eyes and nodded, unable to find words to express what she felt. How could such a small, seemingly helpless creature have been capable of saving her son's life? Kiko was more than just a monkey. He was a guardian, a savior. The following days were marked by recovery. Dr. Raoul carefully monitored Miguel, adjusting small herbal remedies that he himself prepared from the forest's resources. And Kiko was always there, sitting beside Miguel, watching with keen eyes, as if wanting to ensure that every breath was steady, every heartbeat was strong. He rarely left the baby's side, and when he did, it was only to bring food to Lara or assist Dr. Raoul with small tasks. Lara began to see Kiko as part of the family. Every time Miguel opened his eyes, still sleepy and fragile, he seemed to look for his furry friend. The bond between the two grew stronger, as if Miguel knew that it was thanks to Kiko that he was alive. And every night, before falling asleep, Lara would look up at the starry sky and give thanks for that unexpected miracle. A miracle brought by a monkey who refused to abandon a human baby in need. But there was still a road ahead. Miguel was alive, but his recovery would take time, and the risk of setbacks was still high. Lara knew that she couldn't stay there forever. And when the time came to finally begin her journey back to the village, she would face a new challenge: convincing the community that what had happened wasn't just by chance, but a true miracle. Days turned into weeks, and Miguel began showing signs of recovery. His pale skin gained color, his weak cries turned into soft giggles and curious babbles. Lara couldn't hold back the tears every time she saw the fragile but hopeful smile on her baby's face. It was as if he had been reborn. Every small movement, every peaceful sigh, was a miracle for her. And Kiko never left the baby's side. The monkey would sit beside the makeshift bed, like a true guardian, monitoring Miguel's every breath and emitting soft sounds whenever the boy seemed to stir. Dr. Raúl watched it all with a discreet smile. He knew that Miguel's survival was a combination of many factors, but above all, he believed there was something special about Kiko. The monkey seemed to have an inexplicable connection with the baby. When Miguel was restless, it was Kiko who could calm him. When Lara needed to rest, it was Kiko who took her place beside the little one, remaining alert and watchful. It was as if he understood that this baby needed more than just medical treatment. He needed love, protection, and a silent guide. A month later, Dr. Raúl finally gave Lara the news she had been waiting for. "Lara, he's strong enough to go back home," he said with a smile, though there was a shadow of concern in his eyes. "But you'll have to keep caring for him with great attention. The village is days away, and the journey will be difficult. Do you think you can manage?" Lara looked at her baby, smiling and playing with his small fingers. Then she turned to Kiko, who was watching her with those deep eyes. "I won't be alone, Doctor. Kiko will be with us. He brought us here, and I believe he'll take us back." With renewed hope and strength, Lara prepared for the journey back to the village. She packed a small bag with fruits and herbal medicines that Dr. Raúl had prepared for Miguel. "I don't know how to thank you, Doctor. You saved my son's life," she said. Dr. Raúl smiled softly. "I didn't bring you here, Lara. Kiko did. Sometimes, the greatest miracles come from the least expected places." With a final embrace, Lara set off with Miguel in a sling on her chest and Kiko leading the way. This time, there was no troop of monkeys, only the three of them moving through the dense forest. The trek was long and arduous, but Kiko's presence made it bearable. He remained vigilant, checking the path and even bringing Lara fresh fruits whenever she looked exhausted. After several days, familiar paths began to appear, and the distant murmur of voices and campfires filled Lara's heart with a mix of relief and anxiety. How would the villagers react to seeing her return with Miguel alive? As they reached the village entrance, tears filled Lara's eyes. The place where she had suffered so much now felt like a sanctuary. Villagers gathered around, their faces filled with disbelief and wonder. "Lara, is it really you? And Miguel, is he?" Lara nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He's okay. He'll be okay, thanks to a friend, an angel of the forest." At that moment, everyone noticed Kiko, standing beside Lara as always, his posture calm and protective. There was something almost majestic about him. The villagers whispered in awe. Mr. Antonio stepped forward, his voice shaking. "This is the monkey that was always near you before you left. How did he help?" Lara's voice was filled with emotion. "He guided us through the forest to a doctor who saved Miguel's life. Kiko stayed with him, protecting him, caring for him. He's more than a monkey, he's our guardian." The murmurs grew louder, and some people moved closer, while others just stared in disbelief. But suddenly, Miguel's clear laughter rang out. The baby looked at Kiko, his tiny hand reaching out, and the monkey gently touched it with his paw. The gesture was so delicate and human that everyone fell silent. Lara knew then that they understood. Kiko wasn't just a monkey. He was a protector, a hero. "He's more than you think," Lara said softly. "He saved my son." Mr. Antonio, tears in his eyes, knelt before Kiko. "Thank you, Kiko, for bringing them back." Kiko looked at him calmly and nodded, his presence saying more than words ever could. From that day on, Kiko's story spread throughout the village and beyond. He was more than just an animal. He was a symbol of hope and a reminder that true courage can come from the most unexpected places. One late afternoon, with the sun painting the sky in hues of orange and red, Lara sat at the edge of the village with Miguel in her arms, watching Kiko gazing at the dense line of trees that marked the boundary between the human territory and the wilderness. "I guess you want to go back home, don't you, my friend?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Kiko looked at her, and there was a deep understanding in his eyes. He approached slowly and touched Miguel's face gently, as if saying goodbye. The baby laughed and tried to grasp the monkey's paw, babbling words only he could understand. Kiko looked at Lara one last time, and she knew this was the moment to let him go. With a quiet nod and tears rolling down her cheeks, she murmured, "Thank you, Kiko. You saved his life. And mine. I will never forget." Kiko then stood up slowly and, with one final glance at the baby he had protected with so much love and determination, began walking toward the forest. The villagers, who were watching the scene, felt a lump in their throats. It was as if they were saying goodbye to a family member. Kiko paused at the edge of the forest, turned, and raised his head, looking at everyone with his deep, penetrating eyes. It was a farewell, but also a recognition. And then, silently, he disappeared among the trees, like a spirit returning to his home. The village remained silent for a long time after his departure. But Lara felt a peace she had never felt before. Kiko had fulfilled his role. He had come, done the impossible, and saved Miguel's life. Now, she knew he would be protecting other lives, guiding other lost hearts, and being the guardian angel he was always meant to be. Time passed, and Miguel grew strong and healthy. As the years went by, he always wanted to know more about the magic monkey his mother mentioned in her stories. Lara would recount every detail, tears in her eyes but a smile on her face. Kiko's presence remained alive in every word, in every memory she shared. To her, he had never really left.